In some countries, they've merged their currencies with either the dollar or the euro. For example, the countries of Panama, Ecuador, El Salvador, and Zimbabwe have dollarized, meaning they use the US dollar. So if you were going to travel to these places, it would be analogous to traveling to another state. You wouldn't need to exchange your dollars for their respective currencies. You could just shop with your US dollars. Similarly, in Europe, many of the European countries have adopted the euro as their currency. So if you travel from France to Germany to Belgium to Italy, it's all one currency. Another option is a gold standard. Under a gold standard, countries maintain their respective currencies, but they agree to redeem those currencies for physical gold. This has the effect of creating fixed exchange rates throughout the participating countries. There's many examples of this throughout history, but the best examples that are most recent would be the 19th century in the US all the way up to the Great Depression of the 1930s and the Bretton Woods system after World War II. Let's focus on the Bretton Woods system because the effects of that system are still with us today. After World War II, many countries in Europe they had been decimated and they needed to recover. So they needed to be able to trade. They needed to trade to get steel and iron ore and oil and all sorts of ingredients to repair the damages of the war. Problem is, each of these European countries like Germany and Italy and France, they were issuing their own currencies. And nobody really wanted to take those currencies and trade. I mean, if Germany is destroyed and can't really produce a lot and wants to give France, let's say, German marks and get all these resources, France might say no. A lot of businesses in France might not want to take that bargain because they have no confidence that the German mark is going to be worth anything in the future. So it's hard to get trade in that environment. So what the countries came up with, and it actually occurred at a meeting in Bretton Woods. That's why it's called the Bretton Woods system. Bretton Woods, New Hampshire is where all these global finance people got together to try to orchestrate this recovery process. And they decided to first recognize that the U.S. was now the global superpower after World War II. Not only had we won the war, but we were so far removed from the damage that we were the most stable economy. So the Bretton Woods participants said, well, why don't we have all these countries in Europe and other parts of the world agree to redeem their currencies for dollars? So Germany would hold dollars in its central bank, France would hold dollars in its central bank, and Germany would agree to redeem holders of marks for dollars. And France would agree to redeem for holders of the French franc dollars. In other words, if you held the German mark or the French franc, it was as good as holding dollars. And the dollar was stable because the U.S. was relatively unscathed from the war. So this was going to provide a more fertile environment for European countries to trade. Because now, if someone in France, if they're going to get German marks for selling their resources and their goods to Germany, at least they know that the German mark may not be worth much, but it is worth dollars. And that means there's an integrity to the German mark that wouldn't have been there before. And then the question was, well, how stable is the dollar? I mean, the dollar is issued by the U.S. government, but let's provide an extra layer of protection by linking the U.S. dollar to gold. And this is where we used to have a lot of gold held in Fort Knox. And so if you had dollars, you could get gold redeemed for it. So this is a direct gold standard for the U.S. because dollars would be redeemable for gold, and an indirect gold standard for other countries that are participating. The German mark got you dollars, and then the dollars would get you gold. The French franc would get you dollars, and then the dollars would get you gold. So this created not only fixed exchange rates across the world and the participating countries, but it also provided a level of confidence in the monetary system that trade took off. And we really have a post-World War II boom that some would argue is still going on today. A lot of the globalization and international trade that we see today would not likely be possible were it not for this system after World War II. So this continues from World War II to 1971, at which point the U.S. goes off the gold standard, which means now it's just dollars and no opportunity to redeem for gold. So if you had German marks or French francs, you get dollars from your respective central banks, but you couldn't then turn those dollars into gold. So this did lower the confidence in the system, but it still continued to exist and does to this day. All these countries in Europe and all over the world, they still hold US dollar reserves in their central banks. And because they had been doing this for so long, they started to, at the highest levels of trade and government finance, they started just using US dollars to trade with each other. So when you have an international commodity like oil, as an example, if Germany is going to buy oil from, say, Norway, well, why go through the process of changing the euro into the Norwegian krone in order to buy that oil? Why not just tap into the reserves of dollars that Germany has and pay Norway in dollars? And Norway said, well, we'll take dollars because we need dollar reserves as well. And we know we can use those dollars in the Middle East, or we can use those dollars in Australia, or we can use those dollars in America. Once the world started to use dollars as a reserve currency to back their currencies, then the dollar became the primary means through which countries traded with each other. So even to this day, we're far removed from the end of Bretton Woods. Like I said, it ended in 1971, but we're not removed from the behavior of Bretton Woods. Countries today act very similarly to the way they did when the dollar was backed by gold and countries had to back their respective currencies with dollars. Another way of putting this is, if there is an international currency, it would be considered the dollar today. And we're going to see later on that that has both pros and cons for the U.S. But it is a very important factor in understanding the macroeconomics of the U.S. Next, we're going to talk about pegging exchange rates and the East Asian crisis of the late 90s. This was an event that transpired not just in one country, but in many countries. We're going to use Thailand as an example, but it's going to be a proxy for a lot of this region. South Korea, Japan, the Philippines, Vietnam, and several other countries were quite significantly impacted. Some to the point where the ramifications are still in their countries today. Now, all of these countries have recovered and quite frankly have done well, in part because they've learned their lessons of what not to do with currency manipulation. So let's take a look at the Thai baht. And in this market, we have relative to the US dollar. So the demand curve for Thai baht and the supply curve of Thai baht, and then dollars per Thai baht. So the floating exchange rate would be 3 cents. That would be no currency manipulation. But we're going to see that the Thai government in the early 90s is going to start a process of overvaluing the baht. Why would they want to do this? By making their currency appreciate, they're going to make their currency more expensive for Americans. That's not going to help their exports, but they're not concerned with their exports. They don't have a strong export economy at that point anyway. What they're concerned with is developing their economy, essentially growing their economy from undeveloped to developed. Kind of what we did 100 years ago in the Industrial Revolution. They wanted to undertake in this period. And one of the ways to accelerate that is to make foreign resources and inputs in production cheaper. It's the developed world like the US that has all the machinery and the equipment and the technology. These Thai businesses want to get it. So if the government makes the Thai baht worth more in terms of dollars, they're making all those resources in America available. And that's going to allow an accelerated rate of industrialization, essentially do in a matter of 4 or 5 years what would otherwise take maybe decades to achieve. So how do they do this? Well, this is, again, the market for baht, demand and supply. We're initially at an equilibrium of 3 cents per Thai baht. The Thai central bank, if they want to raise the value of their currency, they're going to have to shift this demand curve, which I've labeled here market, to the right until they reach the peg that they want to achieve. So I'm going to put demand market plus central bank. In order to achieve this, that is, in order to increase demand for Thai baht, they have to use their stockpile of US dollars. You can't buy baht without the other currency. The other currency is dollars here. So they got to go to their stockpile of dollars and buy up baht. We know that they're going to have dollars because the dollar is the international reserve currency and pretty much every central bank holds US dollars. The problem for Thailand is they're eventually going to run out of dollars. And so this increase in demand for baht is not going to be sustainable. So you will start to see currency speculators getting out of the baht at the same time the central bank is demanding less baht. So the demand curve starts to move to the left as the central bank is running out of dollars to buy baht, but then it continues to shift left as currency speculators get out of the rapidly depreciating currency. And in essence, we eventually reach a new demand curve that is going to be down here. We'll put demand M1 to distinguish it from this. The demand curve, when the central bank stops purchasing baht, doesn't just go back to the market demand. It goes to a new market demand because speculators no longer want to be in that depreciating currency. So the new equilibrium is down here. We'll call that 2 cents. And that has brought the value of the baht down from 4 cents to 2 cents. That is a 50% decrease in the value of the baht. So that's significant. So we started here. The Thai government central bank raised the value of the baht, but then they couldn't sustain it, so the value of the baht collapsed to 2 cents. What are the ramifications for our business in Thailand that was used to growing its resources on the overvalued baht, effectively getting access to American resources and goods at artificially low prices, unsustainable prices? The way that these businesses actually undertook this process is important. They borrowed US dollars from US banks to buy the equipment and everything else. So imagine you're a Thai business and you borrowed $1 million from an American bank. But when you did that, it was 4 cents per baht. So here you are, you're generating your revenue in Thailand, selling products to all your Thai customers, and you're getting paid in baht. And you expect that you can take those baht that you earn in revenue and exchange them for 4 cents for every baht in order to pay back that $1 million loan. But then this currency crisis ensues, and now you can only get 2 cents for every baht. In essence, you now have a loan that is twice as burdensome. You have to generate twice as much revenue to make those loan payments or to pay back that loan, which means you're probably not going to be able to. And now you have these small and medium-sized Thai businesses that go under, that collapse, and the economy goes with it. So that's the consequences. Very short-term benefit, stimulus to economic growth in many of these countries, but definitely a longer term consequence that has to be considered in the future.